Jon Jones continues to keep the heavyweight division hostage. Jon Jones recently made his round of callouts in a post-event interview of the PFL vs Bellator event this past weekend and said that he would beat Stipe Miocic, Francis Ngannou, and Tom Aspinall, which isn't a ridiculous callout considering it is Jon Jones. He's the consensus greatest of all time at this point and should be favored to beat all three. But what really grinds my gears is that waiting for these fights has essentially brought the UFC's heavyweight division to a grinding halt and prevents it from moving to the next era of fighters. We're coming up to almost exactly a year since Jon Jones fought and submitted Ciryl Gane for the heavyweight championship, and Jon Jones, from what it seems, is nowhere near fighting again. Jon was injured back in November due to a pectoral tear that would need 6 to 9 months to recover, and since then has fallen crazy out of shape. And look, I understand that an injury definitely limits the amount of training you can do, but the fact that Jon Jones is looking like this, most recently from a seminar he did in Thailand, means that he's not fighting anytime soon, which also means the heavyweight division won't move on anytime soon. And Sheik Jones is not fooling anyone with that black clothing. Even Francis Ngannou hilariously called him out for it. And apparently Jon Jones was offered to fight for UFC 300, in which he declined, though to be fair, a fight in April would have been on the lower end of the 6 to 9 month recovery timeline, but this just shows there really is no word on when Jon will return again. So in this video, let's explore the different choices Jon can make to return to fighting, whether in the UFC or otherwise, how likely each choice is in actually coming into fruition, and how each move impacts the heavyweight division of the UFC for better or for worse. Starting out with the most obvious move, and the move Jon Jones continues to push, fighting Stipe Miocic seems like the most likely next move for Jon Jones. Originally scheduled for last November at UFC 295, Jon Jones was going to make his first title defense against UFC heavyweight legend and probably go to the division, Stipe Miocic, before that dreaded pectoral injury that has sidelined him ever since. And despite Jon Jones saying that true hardcore fans want to see this fight, I think a majority of us would hate that this might be the fight Jon is coming back to. Obviously, this fight would have been sick like 6 years ago, but considering Stipe Miocic is 41 years old, yeah, you heard that right, 41 years old, this fight more so feels like one of these fights with retired legends instead of a fight for who is truly the best MMA heavyweight in the world right now. Stipe Miocic is technically still a top 5 ranked heavyweight contender, which makes zero sense at all. The last time Stipe fought was back in March of 2021, damn near 3 years ago, when he got knocked out by Francis Ngannou in the rematch where he lost the heavyweight belt. And to put this insane inactivity into perspective, Francis Ngannou went on to defend the belt once against Ciryl Gane, had himself a year of inactivity where no one knew where he was going, proved everyone wrong by signing with PFL, and then made his transition into boxing and had a competitive fight with, at the time, the consensus best heavyweight boxer. To further put this inactivity into perspective, Alex Pereira wasn't even in the UFC yet when Stipe last fought. He would make his UFC debut in November of 2021 and has since become 6-1 in the UFC, had 2 legendary fights with his longtime rival Israel Adesanya, and has become a champion in 2 different weight classes, all within the time gap between the last time Stipe fought until now. The last time Stipe got a win was on August 15th, 2020, or 1,290 days since he fought, beat, and closed out his rivalry with Daniel Cormier, and since then, DC has retired and has become a full-time commentator for the UFC. So to say that Stipe has been inactive and doesn't deserve his top 5 ranking is a vast understatement, to say the least. So Jon Jones coming back to this fight is absolutely disastrous for the heavyweight division. Jon will very much likely beat Stipe Miocic, but again, given where Stipe is in his career, this does nothing for the heavyweight division. This isn't a good defense for Jon Jones and only makes Tom Aspinall, the true heavyweight contender, more inactive. Fighting Tom Aspinall is easily the best option for the heavyweight division in Jon Jones' legacy, but I would put this at around 10% likelihood for being Jon's next move. Ever since Tom Aspinall won the interim heavyweight title back in November, there still is no official word of Jon fighting Tom next, which I think defeats the whole purpose of the interim belt. We rarely see interim titles fought for and defended. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the last time we saw an interim belt fought for was when Justin Gaethje beat Tony Ferguson and won that belt off Tony, since Khabib couldn't fight. But with the way it's looking like, Tom Aspinall really might have to defend his interim belt if he wants to stay active. I mean, not only does Tom Aspinall have to wait 6 to 9 months for Jon's injury, but now you're telling him he has to wait another 3 to 4 months for Jon to fight Stipe and recover? That's ludicrous. There's a real possibility Tom won't fight anyone for a year with no fault of his own if he wants to hold on to the interim belt and get a guaranteed shot with Jon Jones. Back in November, right after his win over Sergey, Tom called for Jon Jones to be stripped of the title, citing that other recent champions like Jamal Hill and Yuri Prochazka have given up their belts in the wake of their injuries to keep the division active. And credit to Tom, everything's worked out as both have had or will have the opportunity to fight Alex Pereira to get the belt again. And instead of doing the righteous move, Jon Jones took to Twitter and said, "Now I have newcomers requesting I get my championship stripped. 0 wins over legends, 0 title defenses, already thinking you can call the shots to Dana. That's hilarious. In my 15-year career, I've seen so many guys who are supposed to be the next big thing. There's only been one Jon Jones. Never forget that." And he would continue to say a lot of other things on Twitter when Tom Aspinall would finally respond to one of them saying, "Jon, you're letting your ego run wild here, mate. I'm not downplaying your resume. It's incredible, far superior to mine. You are known as the best fighter ever, and that's exactly why I want to beat you. Surely you can understand that." And Jon Jones would continue to go hard in the paint with his response and double down on his decision to not give up the belt and fight Stipe. So I would imagine a fight with Tom won't happen anytime soon, which blows. If anything, to find the true title contender, Stipe should fight Tom next, and according to Tom Aspinall, was going to be a fight for UFC 300 before Stipe apparently declined. Tom also hilariously called out the inactivity of Stipe, in which Stipe responded, after he gets the belt from Jon, he wants to unify, which I don't know, maybe he's really living in a video game if he really thinks that's happening. But however which way this plays out between Jon Jones, Stipe, and Tom, we can all agree that Tom Aspinall versus Jon Jones is the best option for the heavyweight division, but probably one of the least likely to happen. And speaking of least likely to happen, there still is technically the possibility that somehow, someway, Jon Jones makes the super fight between him and Francis Ngannou. The Francis super fight was the fight originally set for Jon's UFC return and debut at the heavyweight division, but that fell through when Francis, I thought, fumbled the bag by turning down a $10 million contract with the UFC. Since then, Francis has obviously proved me wrong, and there's been hints of Jon and Francis possibly squaring off in a PFL UFC crossover, as the two have been at 2 PFL events now, teasing a possible super fight. But the likelihood of this happening is so minimal. Dana White obviously hates cross-promotional events. Dana was initially against the idea of the Conor McGregor versus Mayweather boxing match, claiming it would never happen until it got so big that it was the only option for Dana. But since then, Dana hasn't considered a cross-promotional event again, and I mean a big reason for why Francis Ngannou left in the first place is because Dana couldn't guarantee a boxing match for Francis, so Francis had to go out on his own and do it himself. As much as every fight fan wants to see this fight, being that the PFL is literally a direct competitor to the UFC, I don't think Dana would give this fight a time of day. But if somehow this happens, this would be the most disastrous for the heavyweight division for the UFC. I would imagine if Jon fights Francis, he would still want that Stipe fight in his return, meaning there would be an additional 3 to 4 months for Tom to wait on top of the already year he probably has to wait for Jon's injury and return fight with Stipe. So as much as we want to see the super fight, Jon better be relinquishing that belt or fighting Tom right after, or him holding the belt would be absolutely ridiculous. And finally, the last option Jon Jones could make, and it's a pretty plausible one at that, is retiring. I know he probably doesn't want to admit it, but at this age, considering the shape he's in and everything he's done, the best move is probably to just retire. I obviously don't have to explain his resume, but he is easily the greatest of all time and has absolutely nothing to prove. If he goes out like GSP, getting a belt in a higher weight class after his return, retiring, and finally vacating, I think a lot of fans would not be mad at that at all. And this move probably makes the most sense for everyone. Tom would probably be promoted to actual champion, and the division would finally move on from Jon into the new era. And sure, Jon can do the same thing to the division by vacating the belt, but at this point, that decision is out of the question given Jon's tweets, and I would give that a 0% chance of actually happening. But hopefully Jon either takes up retiring or fighting Tom, or will be stuck in limbo at the heavyweight division for a pretty long time. So what do you guys think about Jon Jones' decision? Is he going to retire? Is he going to vacate maybe? Or is he going to fight Tom or Stipe? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.